Hi trendsetters on YouTube, this is Lena, Tarot Down Under. Today I'm going to do the Democratic Party. I did the Republican Party recently, so it's only fair to see what's coming up for the Democrats. And as I was thinking about this reading, it occurred to me that I think in many countries over the world with a two-party system, voters are getting very sick of both parties. And part of the problem for that is countries like the US, the UK, Australia, they have a Conservative Party, and then they had what used to be the Workers' Party. We call it the Labour Party here, it's the Labour Party in the UK. And traditionally they supported working conditions and improvements for working families. And I think what's happened over the last 30 years is they've taken all the same sort of decisions as the more conservative parties have. And what has happened is wages haven't moved for 20 and 30 years in these countries. So things are going backwards. So people who are my age, their kids are for the first time looking at a situation where their lives won't be as good as their parents. It's starting to go backwards. So kids are staying at home longer. It's really hard for them to even rent somewhere to live, let alone buy somewhere to live. So things are going backwards in the West. And to a certain extent, I think the Democratic Party and the Labour Party in Australia and New Labour in the UK have to really look at this by getting in bed with big corporations and buying that line that trickle-down economics will work. You know, you just look after the big boys and then they'll look after you. It's not working, and so we need to support unions again for a start. So wages are being driven down, things are being rolled back, and you have this hysteria around immigration. And if you look at all those countries, migrants were brought to Australia, the US, the UK and everywhere to build those countries. We would not have the prosperous countries that we have if it weren't for migrants. So I think this debate is really about racism. It's not about migrants. So in Australia, for example, the biggest group of illegal immigrants is actually people from the UK. And no one, if you stop people in Australia and said on the street, what is the biggest group, they would never say to you, oh, I bet it's the English. It's about the visibility of race. So it's much easier to point fingers at other ethnic groups than it is to look at the economics of capitalism. So that's my story leading into this reading. So let's see if the US Democrats are able to actually shift their mindset too, and they need to step up their game or they're going to be marginalised as well. And then we're all going to end up with a heap of independence and nothing will get done, and it's not always a good thing. So let's see what's in store for the Democrats in 2018. I'll just adjust the screen for you. Okay, well, interesting in light of what I was just talking about. This is the Hangman. Those of you who watch a lot of YouTube tarot readers will be becoming more familiar with these cards now. So the Hangman represents many things, but to me what hits me about this image as the central image is the character, or in this case the Democratic Party, is suspended. So nothing is actually happening at the moment. It's not to say a lot isn't happening behind the scenes, but they're caught, they're suspended. And one of the meanings behind this figure is the figure is held up by their own beliefs. So that's interesting if you think about it. It's like they're so stuck in their beliefs that they're struggling to actually move forward. So let's see if that is going to move. See if there's any momentum or shift about that. So the core thing they have to realize and to act on in order to really re-energize the party. So in this position, this is the Six of Wands or Six of Staffs. Very interesting. It often represents a new leader. Da-da. I think for both parties, I'm sorry, you've got to stop putting up the 70-year-olds. I've got nothing against older people. God knows I'm not 22 anymore. It's not about that. There's a lot of wisdom to be had, but more behind the scenes. They need a new, younger leader, and I see this new, younger leader in the wings. This person is not here yet. In other words, this person is not a public name or a household name or on your news nightly. This person is what they need, new leadership. So, what's the cross to bear with that issue of new leadership? Well, this is a card of, if you like, the war horse or the old war machine, but I also think of it as a card of the mercenary. So, given that it's pentacles and coins, they've still got a lot of people who are, as I was just saying, funnily enough, left over from the old system. They will have new ones coming through, but they're going to have to move through those who have, in a way, not really stayed with their own convictions. This is the mercenary aspect to this card is about being hired for money, so being hired as a soldier. So I think the Democratic Party has probably been relying too much on, if you like, the professionals who are coming in to fight the fight for the Democratic Party, and they're missing some of the bigger picture. So let's see how that plays out. The root or core of the reading, the Magician. I see this as quite a positive card in terms of the Democrats reinventing themselves. This is the card of the alchemist. So they're capable of doing it, but equally they're just as capable of deluding themselves by this sort of magic. But if you think a bit more about the magician figure, what is very strong about this, it's part of what's called the major arcana, is the magician controls all the elements of the tarot, the swords, the cups, the pentacles. It's all there. Looking, the staff. Okay, so in other words, what this is saying to me is the ingredients are there. So which way is it going to go? Are they going to transform themselves? In the immediate past, the card of the World. This turned up in Ivanka's reading. So looking at it a bit closer here. If you look at the imagery in the corners, you have the powerful elements of the lion and the magic bull and the eagle. Oh, sorry, off screen. So the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the angel. So there's a lot of energy working for them, but given this is in the recent past, as I was saying in the Ivanka reading, it's a bit like they're spinning their wheels a bit. They've relied on the fact that they appear more worldly than Republicans. So it's their appeal. On the one hand, they're more open to minorities and the world. So they need to preserve those values as well as moving on. So thinking about the world there. Overarching this reading, women celebrating. In the current climate of Me Too and intolerance for sexual harassment that's been around since the Stone Age, I think for the Democrats to get into power, they need to bring more women on board, and that is the secret. I don't think they need a tarot reading for that. I think they understand perfectly well that as women are speaking out more and more, go the pussy hat. Their ultimate victory and their progress and their evolution rests with how they handle issues around women. So I'm quite interested that this should actually be overarching the entire reading. In other words, if they get the appeal to women right, they may well romp in subsequent elections. If they don't, not so much. In the aftermath of the Alabama election, the polls coming out of Iowa are also saying that Republican women are starting to move away from voting automatically from cradle to grave. I'm just a born Republican. Even Republican women are starting to really think about these issues. So it's a real challenge to the old way of doing business, which is that men have not been held accountable for some really primitive behaviour. So coming up in the near future, hard work. It is going to be hard work. That also, I'm sure, is not a surprise. So a lot of work has to go into this. And the figure in this card, also known as the Apprentice, so I'm always amused when it comes up in a Trump-related reading. To be good at something, you have to really do the groundwork, take your time, and do it well. So that is part of their motto. They have to inspire, but they also have to do the grunt work. Now, how does the party see itself? All right, now this is the King of Cups. To a certain extent, they are, in light of where it sits, how do they see themselves? They see themselves as morally and emotionally more in touch than the Republicans, and I suspect they are. So if you just look at that figure a little closely, so the cups represent emotion, but also the intuitive. It's about perception. So because it's the King card, in relation to the women, I think they have to keep the men on board and take the men of America, and from my position, the men of the world, on this journey too. In other words, it's not just saying to women, you don't have to put up with this anymore and you deserve equal pay and this should happen and that should happen. That's all true. It should happen. But it's not going to happen unless men stand up and also help make it happen and become better bosses, better husbands, better sons. This is about men getting in touch with their side, more feminine side of themselves. So I think that's fairly interesting, and I think it's absolutely key if they're going to be successful. So acting on that, what's the discourse? That is the Happy Family Republican card. So in other words, this position is what is acting against this happening, and the Republicans are going to have a very strong voice of saying, you know what, this is the normal family, this is a successful family, this is the family that God wants. So in other words, where does that leave single mother households? Where does it leave same-sex couple parents? Where does it leave extended families generally that don't just work in mum, dad and 2 kids? Right, so this is a very old-fashioned idea of what a good family is or what a righteous family is. So there will be a lot of publicity and a lot of moral talk around that. The environment. They've got to be careful. The High Priestess. So Beelzebub, Yahweh, good and evil, but also the downside of this card is secrets and deception. The upside of this card is understanding the deeper mysteries. So you can have all of this being blasted over the airways, but you've got to have a conviction that there are deeper things in life that should be valued. For the outcome, Knight of Wands. Interesting. Charging forth new ideas, a fresh approach. I'm amazed, I just looked at my clock and it's 15 minutes already, so I'm going to stop there. That's fairly positive. Please do not think I'm just waving in the Democrats and that, you know, they're the obvious choice. There's going to be a lot of Fox News-like opposition, but I think that's quite a positive card to end on. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.